Since the start of Splatoon 3, Sloshers have held a pretty healthy state in the meta, especially when compared to the last 2 years of Splatoon 2's quad shooter meta. Machine is one of the best weapons in the game, Try is seeing more use because of the buffs to Tacticooler and Inkjet, and Slosher and X-Splosher both have unique niches where it can thrive on particular map mode combinations and specific team compositions. But one particular Slosher has been left on the sidelines since the start of Splatoon 3, and that's the Bloblobber. Now, if you're clicking on this video and you're a Blob main, you might be thinking to yourself, there's nothing wrong with my bathtub. I splatted 20 people in my last Turf War match, and as crazy as that sounds, I'm here to burst your bubble. Personal experience does not always translate to overall success of a weapon. My name is Gus, and I'm a competitive player who specializes in the Slosher weapon class. For this video, let's take a look at the most underutilized Sloshers in the competitive scene in Splatoon 3. A couple of disclaimers before we start. When I say competitive, I don't mean competitive in the sense of how it performs in Anarchy, X-Battle, Turf War, or even Salmon Run. I'm talking about how Blob performs in organized team settings such as a tournament. I also do not hate this weapon. I love the Slosher weapon class. As I said, I specialize in this class. So if you main the Bloblobber, please know that I'm not trying to diss you or your main weapon, because I like it too. It's really fun. But I just want to share the harsh realities of this weapon to explain why it's not used at a high level and top level, and what we can do to potentially fix it to give it at least a unique niche like it had in Splatoon 2. So if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to hit that like button, comment, and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts on Bloblobber and what it could potentially need to help it thrive. With that out of the way, let's get started on the video. Alright, so first, let's go over the weapon. What is the Bloblobber? Well, the Blob is a long-range Slosher. This Slosher fires a line of 4 bubbles which will bounce along the ground and can even reflect on walls. It's the most unique aspect of this weapon. Given these attributes, it's known for a couple of strengths in which that it can paint extremely well, it can farm its special consistently, it's good at negating space from the enemy given how the bubbles linger on the field, and it's the only Slosher that can splat in one swing. So just hearing that, you might think, well, wouldn't that make it a really good weapon for a game where painting is really important? Yeah, it could have a niche on Turf War, but painting isn't everything in Splatoon 3. And you also have to take into consideration all of the weaknesses that Blob has. And that's the weapon's low mobility, high ink consumption, and it's very vulnerable in close range situations. Unfortunately, these weaknesses were exacerbated when the player base transitioned from Splatoon 2 to Splatoon 3. So let's take a quick trip down memory lane to understand how the Blob performed in Splatoon 2 in the competitive scene. Now, I'll be honest with you, outside of a very select few of high-level competitive players such as Pika, Isaac, and on occasions Bagel, Blob was not used as much. But it still had that high level and top level representation in Splatoon 2, which is notable when no high level player is using Blob in Splatoon 3. So why is that? Well, I spoke briefly on this issue with Pika on my podcast, and one of the reasons is that it boils down to the difference in pace between Splatoon 2 and Splatoon 3. If you were familiar with Splatoon 2's specials, you would know that the game had a more passive and team coordinated playstyle. For example, because of the 2 best specials in the game, Ink Armor and Tenna Missiles, it encouraged a passive playstyle, where a team will wait on their NZAP to get Ink Armor or their K-Shot to get Tenna Missiles before pushing in. So why is this information important to understand why Blob is not played as much in Splatoon 3? Well, because Splatoon 2 was a lot slower. Blob could use its strengths in walling people out and hide its weaknesses in being vulnerable in close range and fast situations. So when you fast forward to Splatoon 3, which has shown to be a more fast-paced game with specials that are not as reliant on team coordination as Ink Armor was, you can probably start to see why Blob can't keep up. Aggressive specials such as Trizuka, Crab Tank, and more returning specials from Splatoon 2 such as Inkjet and Ultra Stamp are not going to create the best environment and time for a Blob. It also does not help that it was given a kit that just encouraged an even more passive playstyle. In Splatoon 3, this weapon was given Sprinkler and Inkstorm for its first kit. Now, Inkstorm I think is perfect for this weapon, because Blob paints extremely well, so it can get Inkstormed consistently, which could be helpful in situations where you need to displace the enemy from a certain location, or if you want a special that can passively paint over an objective, like the Splat Zones. If anything, Inkstorm is the best special right now that can paint consistently in Splatoon 3. So, if Inkstorm synergizes extremely well with the special, is it the sub? And honestly, it does play a role. Sprinkler does not do anything new for the Blob. Sprinkler's purpose is to paint, right? But why give it a sub capable of painting to main a weapon that already paints extremely well? And either way, you're painting for rain, which has a slowdown timer, so how much is the Sprinkler actually accomplishing? You might be saying, well, that's the point, Gus. You're creating a weapon that can paint well for a painting game, and if that's what you want to go for it. But I think when you design a kit, you give it a sub or a special that can either minimize one of the main weapon's weaknesses or provide a new strength that isn't already afforded to the main weapon. Take a look at the Sloshing Machine. This weapon has a really good kit synergy because Machine as a main weapon is really good at getting consistent high damage, has amazing strafe speed, a huge hitbox, but it struggles in the paint department. So that's where the sub comes in with Fizzy Bomb, which now becomes this tool for the Sloshing Machine to paint if it needs to, and it can combo with the main weapon pretty well. And now you pair it with a Booyah Bomb, a special that not only helps you in challenging long-range weapons, but creates area denial and protection for the main weapon. At least when this weapon was in Splatoon 2, it had two kits that minimized one of its weaknesses. With the vanilla variant, it had Splash Wall, so if you wanted to be aggressive, you had a sub that could protect you. And with the Blob Deco, even though it had Sprinkler, it had a more effective special at the time that could create aggressive area denial in the Bomb Launcher. It was more aggressive than Inkstorm to push in, create area denial, and potentially get picks. So the Sprinkler was building up to something that could be used a little bit more aggressively rather than it being passive, like how the Inkstorm is with the Sprinkler in Splatoon 3. So because of this, the kit has straddled Blob to a specific role, and that's to just paint. And in a game where you have to do different things within the match, in not just painting, but getting the objective, taking out the opponents, maintaining space, taking space, there's other weapons that do the job far better than the Blob, that have subs or a special that provides more value for the team. If you want a better painter, use one of the splashes. If you want Inkstorm, use Seajet. Or if you want to stay within the Slosher weapon class, use Explosher, which also came with Inkstorm at the beginning of the game. Every Slosher other than Blob can fulfill a specific niche for the team. Machine right now fulfills that reliable and consistent Slosher that can fight, take up space, wall people out, and push in. Tri fits into very aggressive comps where you can play for trades, and you can see this weapon excel in fast moving modes such as Rainmaker and Clam Blitz given its kit. And the other Sloshers and Explosher can work on specific maps such as Flounder Heights zones or Mako Mart zones. This is all to say that Blob sadly does not have that unique niche to help it thrive in a fast-paced environment such as Splatoon 3. So what do? We spent quite a bit of time explaining various problems with the Blob. First, I think this weapon will really benefit from a new kit. I think Splash Wall did wonders for this weapon, and it complemented the weapon well. So the special is where it needs something to thrive. I think you can choose from a variety of things, but my top choices are Super Chump and Ink Strike, to closely resemble what the Blob Deco used to have with Bomb Launcher. It creates a form of displacement, and you could use the main weapon's long range to follow up with it. And given that these specials are safer from a distance, Blob will already be in that position to use these effectively. You could take an alternative approach and give Blob an aggressive kit with Trizuka, for example, as some current Blob competitive players such as Hiroisu are calling out for. But at the end of the day, a kit can only do so much. I also think you need to change the main weapon itself. Back in Splatoon 2, Nintendo reduced the damage it dealt to the Rainmaker, Brella Shield, and Splash Wall. I think Nintendo should give some of this damage back. Maybe not for the Brellas, as they've probably suffered long enough. But if you give this weapon damage to challenge objects such as the Rainmaker Shield, or even increase it for Crab Tank, it could develop this good niche. If Big Swig can have it, why can't Blob? Ultimately, this is a team game, and one kit or changes to a main weapon may not solve all of the Blob's problems. But I think we can start somewhere so we can see this weapon get back to a place it had in Splatoon 2.